The city woke up slowly, stretching under the soft light of the early morning. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional car passing by, and the smell of fresh bread from nearby bakeries floated into the air. People were beginning to move, some walking briskly to catch buses, others lingering at corner cafes with warm cups of coffee. Among all this ordinary motion, two lives were beginning their day, completely unaware of each other, yet on paths that were quietly meant to cross. On the east side of the city, a young man woke up in his small apartment. The room was modest, it's not cluttered, but filled with hints of his personality, a stack of books by the window, a worn notebook on the bedside table, and a guitar leaning against the wall. His name was simple and ordinary, much like the life he led. He worked at a small bookstore, a place he had come to love because it allowed him to be around stories all day. He wasn't rich or famous, and he wasn't seeking any extraordinary adventure. What he longed for, though he couldn't admit it even to himself, was a connection that went beyond passing smiles and casual conversations. His morning routine was quiet. He brushed his teeth, washed his face, and made himself a cup of tea. He liked to sit by the window and watch the city slowly come alive. The way the sunlight fell across the rooftops made him feel calm. He often wondered about the people walking down the street. Who were they? Where were they going? Did they ever feel lonely like he did sometimes? These questions lingered, unanswered, but comforting in their own way, like small sparks of thought that kept him company. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, a young woman was waking up. Her life was different, shaped by a mix of responsibility and dreams. She lived with her parents in a slightly bigger apartment, sharing the space with her younger sibling, who was still in school. She had just started working as a graphic designer at a local agency, and every day brought both excitement and a little bit of stress. She loved her job because it allowed her to create, to turn ideas into colors and shapes that others could see and feel. But some days, when deadlines piled up and clients were difficult, she felt exhausted, wishing for someone to just listen. To really understand her, her morning was a little chaotic compared to his. She had to wake her sibling, prepare breakfast, and get ready for work all at the same time. But even in the rush, she took a moment to sit by her window with a cup of coffee. She looked out at the city's skyline, watching the soft light reflect on the glass buildings. It was a small ritual, one that reminded her that the world was bigger than her worries. And maybe, somewhere out there, someone else was having a similar moment, looking at the same sky. Feeling a quiet hope, both of them left their homes around the same time. Stepping into the city streets that were gradually becoming busier, the young man walked to the bookstore, his steps slow and thoughtful. He loved the familiar sights and sounds, the chatter of people at the corner cafe, the hum of buses passing by, the fluttering of pigeons on the sidewalks. Even the smell of exhaust and coffee mixed together in the air felt comforting in a strange way, like it belonged to him. He liked noticing the small details, things most people overlooked. A faded poster on a lamppost, a cracked tile on the sidewalk, the way sunlight created patterns on the pavement. These little things reminded him that life was full of quiet beauty. Even in ordinary moments, the young woman took the bus to her office, standing near the window, holding onto the railing as the vehicle moved through the streets. She watched people passing by, some walking with determination, others strolling slowly, lost in their thoughts. She liked to imagine their stories, giving names to strangers, wondering about their lives. Sometimes she would even smile at them in her mind, hoping that someone, somewhere, would do the same for her. Her life had moments of loneliness too, even surrounded by family and friends. She longed for a connection that felt real. Someone who could see her beyond the surface, beyond the smiles and small talk. Someone who could understand the quiet parts of her heart. The day went on slowly, filled with the rhythms of work and routine. The young man spent his morning arranging books, helping customers, and tidying shelves. He liked watching people pick up books and get lost in them, seeing the little sparks of joy or curiosity on their faces. It reminded him of the worlds waiting beyond the walls of his apartment, worlds where adventure, love, and hope were possible. He sometimes wondered if he could find someone who shared his love for stories. someone who would look at the world with the same gentle curiosity he had. The young woman's day was busy too, filled with client meetings, deadlines, and creative challenges. She moved from one project to another, her mind constantly active. But in between the rush, she found small moments of happiness, a compliment from a colleague, a design that turned out just right, a funny message from a friend. These moments reminded her that life wasn't just about stress and responsibilities. There were tiny joys that could make even an ordinary day feel special. She often thought about the kind of person she wanted to meet, someone patient, kind, and understanding, someone who could make her laugh, someone who could share her quiet moments as well as her big dreams. As the afternoon came, both of them found themselves in places that were ordinary yet comforting. The young man stepped outside the bookstore to take a short break. Leaning against the wall and feeling the warmth of the sun, he watched people pass by, noticing the way a mother held her child's hand, or how a young couple laughed together. These small observations made him feel connected to the world in a way he didn't often express. He felt a quiet longing, a wish for something meaningful to enter his life, though he didn't know exactly what it would look like. The young woman, meanwhile, took her lunch break at a nearby cafe. She ordered a sandwich and sat by the window, enjoying the brief pause from work. She watched the streets outside, observing people as they went about their day. She noticed a man helping an elderly woman cross the road, a child chasing a pigeon, a street musician playing a soft tune on the guitar. These little moments made her smile, reminding her that kindness and beauty existed in unexpected places. She felt a subtle hope, a feeling that maybe someday she would meet someone who saw the world in a similar way, someone who could share these small joys with her. Evening began to settle over the city, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The young man finished his shift and walked slowly back home, taking a longer route through the park. He liked the way the trees swayed in the evening breeze, the way the city lights began to twinkle, creating a calm atmosphere. He often walked alone, enjoying the solitude, yet sometimes feeling the ache of loneliness. He wondered if there was someone else in the city, walking somewhere with the same thoughts, the same quiet longing for connection. The young woman left her office around the same time, taking a route that passed by the park as well. She carried her bag over her shoulder, listening to the distant sounds of children playing and people chatting. She loved the calmness that came as the day ended, the way the city seemed to breathe and settle. She felt a small thrill at the thought of discovering something unexpected, of meeting someone who could change the ordinary rhythm of her life in the most beautiful way. As night approached, their worlds remained separate, yet there was a subtle pull, almost invisible, that was beginning to guide them toward each other. They went about their lives unaware that soon, a single moment, a brief encounter, a smile, a conversation would begin a journey neither of them could have imagined. The quiet longing in their hearts, the curiosity about the world and the people around them, was slowly shaping the stage for something extraordinary. That night, both of them lay in their beds, reflecting on their day. The young man thought about the customers at the bookstore, small joys he had noticed, and the faint hope that someone special might exist for him somewhere in the city. He felt a quiet anticipation, though he didn't know what it was for. The young woman thought about the people she had seen, the little moments of kindness, and the hope that someday someone might understand her in a way that no one else could. She felt a gentle excitement, a feeling that life could bring unexpected surprises when least expected. And so the city slept, holding its secrets in the soft glow of streetlights and the quiet hum of distant traffic. Two hearts, each filled with hope, curiosity, and longing, continued their separate lives, not yet knowing that their paths were slowly, inevitably, moving toward a meeting that could change everything. The ordinary day had ended, but the story was just beginning. A story of connection, discovery, and the quiet magic of two hearts finally finding each other in the vastness of the world. The next morning, the city seemed to wake with a slightly brighter energy, as if it had sensed that something was about to shift in its quiet rhythm. The streets were busier than usual. People hurried past each other, some with an impatient stride, others moving leisurely as if the world had slowed down for a moment just for them. Among the crowd, the two young people went about their routines, unaware that the day would bring them closer than ever before. The young man woke early, as usual, enjoying the calm of the apartment before the city fully came alive. Today he felt a small flicker of excitement, though he didn't understand why. Perhaps it was the sunlight streaming through the window or the sound of birds singing outside. He made his tea, sipping it slowly, allowing himself to take in the simple pleasure of the quiet morning. He glanced at the notebook on his bedside table, filled with small thoughts and sketches from previous days. He sometimes wrote about the people he saw, imagining little stories about them, and today, he found himself wondering about strangers he had passed on the street. He smiled at the thought that perhaps someone out there was thinking of him too. The young woman also woke with a sense of quiet energy. She had a full day ahead, but there was a lightness in her step as she moved around the apartment. Preparing breakfast for herself and her sibling, even in the routine of getting dressed and making lunch, she noticed small things that brought her joy, the way sunlight reflected on the tiles, the sound of water bubbling in the kettle, the scent of freshly baked bread from a nearby bakery. She paused by the window with her coffee, watching the city stretch and wake beneath her. Something about the morning felt different, as if a change was waiting just around the corner. Both of them left their homes around the same time, stepping into the city streets, moving in ways that were ordinary yet purposeful. The young man walked to the bookstore, taking a slightly different route than usual, enjoying the slight variation in scenery. He noticed a small park he often passed without paying much attention. Today he paused for a moment, watching children playing and an elderly couple feeding pigeons. He felt a gentle warmth in his chest, a feeling of calm contentment that he hadn't realized he needed. The young woman boarded the bus to work. Finding her usual spot by the window, she watched the city pass by, noticing faces in the crowd, imagining stories behind each expression. She felt a sense of curiosity, an excitement that maybe something unexpected was going to happen today. She had no way of knowing how close she was to an encounter that could change the rhythm of her days completely. Mid-morning arrived with its usual bustle. The young man was arranging books, straightening the shelves, and greeting the few customers who wandered in. He loved the quietness of the bookstore, the smell of old pages, and the way the sunlight fell through the front windows. He noticed small details that others overlooked: a folded corner in a book, a handwritten note left behind by a previous reader, the soft rustle of pages as someone flipped through a story. These moments made him feel connected to the world. Even when he was alone, the young woman was immersed in her work at the design agency. Her computer screen displayed bright colors and shapes, a canvas for her creativity. She moved from task to task, meeting client expectations while also trying to inject her own vision into the projects. Occasionally, she paused to look out the window, catching glimpses of the street below. She liked to watch people going about their days, imagining little details about their lives. She felt a small thrill in thinking that life had more to offer than deadlines and routines, that there were surprises waiting in the ordinary flow of the world around midday. Fate decided to make its first gentle nudge. The young man had taken a short break and decided to step outside holding a cup of tea in his hand. He wandered toward the small park he had noticed earlier, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. He sat on a bench under a tree, watching the people pass by, feeling content in the simple act of observing life. At almost the same moment, the young woman decided to have lunch at a cafe near the park. She ordered a sandwich and a cup of tea, carrying them to a small table outside. She noticed the park as she walked past, and something about it drew her attention. She chose a seat with a clear view, enjoying the sunlight and the sounds of the city. She pulled out her notebook, jotting down a few ideas for her next project, while occasionally glancing around, taking in the small details of life around her as she looked across the park. She saw him, the young man, sitting alone on the bench. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and though it was fleeting, something in that instant felt significant. There was a subtle spark, a recognition that neither could explain. He noticed her looking in his direction, and he offered a small, tentative smile. She returned it, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Neither of them knew why, but the world seemed to pause for a heartbeat. Letting them share that quiet moment of connection, she went back to her notebook. trying to focus on her work, but she kept stealing glances toward him. He, in turn, noticed the way she seemed to shine in the sunlight. The gentle way she smiled and the soft concentration as she scribbled in her notebook. It was a curious feeling, one he hadn't experienced before. There was an unspoken question in the air, a sense that this brief encounter could be the start of something more, something meaningful. After finishing her lunch, she decided to take a short walk in the park. She didn't know why, but she felt drawn to the benches near the trees. The little paths winding through the grass, and the people enjoying the day. He remained seated, watching the world, feeling a quiet anticipation, as if the day itself had arranged for this encounter. When she approached the bench where he sat, their eyes met again. This time, there was a subtle recognition, a feeling that they had crossed paths for a reason. She hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to speak or just smile. He noticed her hesitation and, gathering courage, said softly, "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" Her eyes lit up at his words. "Yes, it really is," she replied. The simplicity of the exchange, the ease of the conversation, felt like a small miracle. Neither had spoken to a stranger in this way for a long time, yet it felt natural. Like two puzzle pieces slowly finding each other, they began talking in small bursts, sharing thoughts about the city, the park, and the way sunlight made everything seem brighter. He mentioned his love for books and how he worked at a nearby bookstore. She talked about her job as a designer, the projects she was working on, and her fascination with little details in everyday life. The conversation flowed gently, without effort, yet it was filled with curiosity and warmth. Time seemed to stretch as they sat together on the bench. People passed by, but they hardly noticed anyone else. There was something in the way they listened to each other, the quiet attentiveness, and the subtle gestures, the way he tilted his head when she spoke, the way she smiled at his observations that created an unspoken connection. It was a moment of discovery, a beginning of understanding, and a feeling that they had been waiting for this without even knowing it. After a while, the young woman checked her watch and realized she had to return to work. She felt a pang of reluctance, wishing the moment could last longer. He stood as well, feeling the same. There was a gentle awkwardness, as they both wondered if they should say more, but neither wanted to rush. He offered, "Maybe we can meet here again sometime." She smiled, a little shy, but hopeful. "I'd like that," she said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of unspoken possibilities, the promise of more moments to come. They exchanged a few final words, then walked away in opposite directions, both feeling a flutter of excitement that was new and unfamiliar. The day continued, but neither of them could focus entirely on their routines. The young man found himself thinking about the smile, the warmth, and the easy conversation. He felt a strange sense of hope, a feeling that perhaps life had just given him a gentle push toward something important. The young woman, too, felt a lingering joy, her mind replaying the brief conversation, the unexpected connection, and the quiet sense that the world had shifted in a subtle but significant way. Evening came, and both returned to their homes, reflecting on the day. The young man wrote a few lines in his notebook, capturing the feeling of the encounter, though he knew that words could not fully describe it. She, too, jotted down thoughts in her own notebook, sketching little details of the park, the sunlight, and the man who had shared a bench with her for a short but memorable moment. That night, as the city lights twinkled and the streets grew quiet, both lay awake, thinking about the brief encounter that had already left a mark on their hearts. They didn't know what the future would bring. There was a new sense of anticipation, a feeling that something meaningful was beginning. For the first time in a long while, both felt that maybe, just maybe, life had a way of bringing the right people together. Even in the most ordinary moments, the world slept. Holding the memory of a simple conversation on a park bench, two hearts, once strangers, had found a connection that neither could explain yet both felt deeply. And though they were still separate, the threads of their lives were now gently woven together, waiting for the next moment, the next encounter, and the journey that would slowly, beautifully, unfold. The days that followed their first encounter in the park passed with an unusual energy in both their lives. The young man found himself glancing at the clock a little more often during work, imagining what the young woman might be doing at the same moment. He thought about the way her eyes lit up when she spoke, the gentle curve of her smile, and the effortless way she had shared her thoughts. Even in the quiet routine of arranging books and helping customers, he felt a subtle anticipation, a small excitement that made each day feel a little brighter than before. For her, the memory of the bench, the sunlight, and the brief conversation replayed in her mind throughout her workdays. She found herself doodling small sketches inspired by the park, the shadows of the trees, and the way the light had fallen on the man she had met. Her projects at work suddenly seemed more vibrant, more alive, because a quiet warmth had entered her life, a hope that someone else in the city might see the world in a similar way she did. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she felt the subtle joy of something new, something quietly magical beginning to unfold. A few days later, they ran into each other again, completely by chance at a small cafe near the park. Both had come for their morning coffee, neither planning to meet, and yet there they were. The young man recognized her immediately, the same warmth blooming in his chest as before. She looked up from the table she had chosen, her eyes meeting his, and her smile returned naturally, as if the brief connection they had shared had left a lasting imprint. "Good morning," he said softly, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Good morning," she replied, her voice carrying the same gentle warmth that had drawn him in before. They exchanged small courtesies at first, talking about the cafe, the weather, and the little things that had happened in the park. Then, as the initial shyness faded, their conversation grew deeper. He told her about a book he had recently read, a story that had touched him, and she shared how it reminded her of colors and images she had been trying to capture in her work. Their words flowed naturally, revealing glimpses of their personalities, hopes, and quiet dreams. For both of them, this meeting felt different from the first. There was an ease, a familiarity that had grown without either fully understanding why. They laughed together at small jokes, exchanged thoughtful observations about the city, and even paused to notice the people passing by, imagining their stories. Each moment felt significant, yet perfectly ordinary. A rare combination that neither had experienced before. As the days turned into weeks, their encounters became more frequent. Sometimes it was at the cafe, sometimes at the park, and occasionally at the bookstore when she wandered in, pretending to browse while secretly hoping to see him. They began to share more about their lives, the challenges at work, the little victories that often went unnoticed, the small fears and insecurities that they rarely admitted to anyone else. With each shared story, their connection grew stronger, grounded in trust, curiosity, and genuine care. The young man discovered that she had a gentle sense of humor that could brighten even the dullest day. He loved the way she noticed details others overlooked, how she found beauty in ordinary things, and how she could listen without judgment, making him feel truly heard. In turn, she appreciated his calm presence, his thoughtful observations, and the kindness that shone through even in the simplest gestures. She realized that in his company, the city felt smaller, warmer, and somehow more alive. One afternoon, as autumn leaves fell softly in the park, they walked together along the winding paths. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth and fallen leaves. The sunlight filtered through the branches in a golden glow. They spoke quietly, sharing memories from childhood, favorite books, and the small moments that had shaped them. He paused to point out a particularly beautiful tree, its leaves tinged with shades of orange and red, and she laughed, delighted by his enthusiasm. "I've never noticed that tree before," she said, her eyes sparkling. "It's amazing what you see when you slow down," he replied. Smiling, they sat on a bench, watching children play in the distance and couples stroll hand in hand. There was a quiet comfort in the way they sat together, a feeling that time had slowed just enough for them to enjoy the moment fully. They didn't need to fill every second with words. Silence between them was peaceful, comforting, and natural. Despite the growing closeness, life was not without its challenges. The young man faced difficulties at work-long hours demanding customers, and the occasional feeling of being stuck in a routine that didn't quite fulfill him. He sometimes wondered if he was moving in the right direction, and these doubts weighed on him. Even in the presence of the quiet joy he felt when with her, she too faced pressures in her own life. Her projects at the agency were demanding. She struggled with the feeling that her creativity was constantly under scrutiny. There were moments when she doubted herself, questioning whether her efforts were truly appreciated. Yet whenever she thought of him, of their conversations and laughter, she felt a quiet strength, a reassurance that life could be navigated with someone by her side, who understood her in ways few others could. One rainy evening, they found themselves seeking shelter under the awning of a small shop near the park. The rain fell steadily, creating a gentle rhythm on the pavement. They laughed as they waited, sharing an umbrella and talking about the unpredictability of life. It was in these small, unplanned moments that they felt the most real, the most alive. The world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the shared space, the soft sound of rain, and the growing warmth between them. Their bond was strengthened by these everyday experiences, the quiet walks, the shared coffees, the conversations that stretched late into the evening. They began to rely on each other, not out of necessity, but because being together brought a sense of completeness neither had expected. They discovered that connection wasn't always about grand gestures or dramatic events. It could be found in the small, consistent moments of presence and care. One afternoon, while sitting in the bookstore, he noticed a young child staring at a particular book, unsure whether to pick it up. He knelt down and gently asked if the child wanted him to read the first page aloud. The child nodded shyly and he began reading, his voice soft and inviting. She watched from a distance, smiling at the warmth and patience he showed. In that moment, she realized how deeply kind and considerate he was, how his presence could make even the smallest moments feel important and meaningful. They started sharing small pieces of their past, their families, and their childhood memories. He told her about the long walks he used to take in his neighborhood, the afternoons spent reading in quiet corners, and the simple joys that shaped his perspective on life. She shared stories of her family, the challenges she faced growing up, and the dreams she held close to her heart. Each revelation brought them closer, creating a sense of intimacy built on understanding, empathy, and trust. Despite the growing closeness, there were moments of uncertainty. They sometimes hesitated, unsure how to express their feelings fully, afraid of disrupting the delicate balance of their friendship. Yet these hesitations only made their connection stronger. As they learned to communicate in subtle ways through glances, small gestures, and unspoken understanding, they discovered that true closeness didn't always require words. Sometimes it was in the shared silences, the comfortable presence, and the gentle acknowledgement of each other's existence. Evenings became their favorite time of day. After work, they would meet for a walk in the park or sit in the cafe, sharing stories about the day, laughing at small incidents, and enjoying the simplicity of being together. Each meeting, no matter how brief, left a lasting impression, a warmth that lingered long after they parted ways. They began to anticipate these moments, finding joy in the thought that someone in the city truly cared for them and understood them. As autumn deepened, the city changed around them. The leaves turned brilliant shades of gold and red. The air became crisper, and the days grew shorter. Yet, their connection continued to grow, resilient against the changing seasons. They found comfort in each other, a quiet stability amidst the unpredictability of life. Even in the face of challenges, work, pressures, personal doubts, and small disappointments, they had each other, a steady presence that brought reassurance and hope. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in soft shades of pink and orange, they walked along the quiet streets, their hands brushing occasionally, each touch carrying a gentle significance. They spoke about dreams, fears, and the small things that made them happy. The young man paused to point out the way the sunlight reflected off a puddle on the street, and she laughed, delighting in his enthusiasm for the simple beauty of life. "You notice things that most people miss," she said softly, her eyes shining. "And you make me want to notice even more," he replied. Smiling in that moment, they both realized how much they had grown together in such a short time. Their connection was no longer accidental. It was intentional, built through shared moments, laughter, and understanding. They had discovered the joy of having someone who saw them fully. Someone who could make ordinary days extraordinary just by being present. As night fell, they parted ways, each carrying a sense of anticipation and warmth. The young man returned to his apartment, writing in his notebook about the day, the small gestures and the quiet moments that had left him feeling alive. She returned home, sketching little details in her notebook, replaying conversations, laughter, and the soft, comforting presence of someone who had begun to feel essential in her life. And so, the story of their growing bond continued, marked not by grand events, but by the small, meaningful moments that built trust, affection, and understanding. They were no longer strangers, yet their journey was just beginning. A journey that promised discovery, growth, and the gentle unfolding of a connection that had started in the simplest, most human way through curiosity, kindness, and the willingness to notice and be noticed. As the weeks passed, something began to change quietly beneath the comfort they had built together. The warmth was still there, the laughter still came easily, but life, as it often does, started asking harder questions. Small worries grew heavier. Unspoken thoughts began to sit between them during moments that were once effortless. The young man started feeling restless at work. The bookstore, which once felt like a safe place, began to feel smaller. Fewer customers came in, and there were talks about reducing hours. Some days, he stood behind the counter watching the clock, wondering if this was all his life would ever be. He didn't say much about it at first. He didn't want to bring his worries into the space they shared, the space that had become his calm. The young woman noticed the change before he mentioned anything. He still smiled, still listened, but sometimes his eyes drifted away while she was talking. Sometimes his replies came slower, heavier. She asked if everything was okay, and he would nod and say yes, but she could feel the weight he was carrying. She knew that silence could mean more than words. At the same time, her own life began to pull her in a new direction. One afternoon at work, her manager called her into a meeting. A new opportunity had come up, a project with a larger company in another city. It was the kind of chance people waited years for. More responsibility, more growth, more recognition. But it also meant moving away, at least for a while. She walked home that evening with her mind spinning. The city felt louder than usual. Every sound seemed to remind her of how much she loved this place, how much she had built here, and more than anything, how much he had become part of her life. By the time she reached her apartment, her excitement had turned into fear. They met later that evening at their usual cafe. The air felt different. Even the familiar smell of coffee couldn't calm the nervous energy between them. They sat across from each other, hands wrapped around warm cups, eyes searching for the right moment to speak. "I need to tell you something," she said finally, her voice soft. He looked up, instantly attentive. "Okay." She told him about the offer, about the chance to grow, to learn, to finally step into something bigger than what she had known. As she spoke, her hands trembled slightly. She watched his face carefully, afraid of what she might see there. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he took a long breath. He was happy for her, truly, but fear rose in his chest before he could stop it. Fear of distance. Fear of being left behind. Fear of losing the quiet life they had built together. "That's amazing," he said slowly. "You deserve that," she smiled, but her eyes searched his. "You don't sound sure." "I am," he replied. I didn't expect it." Neither had expected life to move so fast. In the days that followed, the uncertainty grew. They still met, still talked, but something fragile had entered their space. Conversations that once flowed freely now stopped and started. Sometimes they avoided the topic completely. Other times it sat between them like a wall neither knew how to climb. He began to withdraw without realizing it. He spent more time alone, walking through the park late at night, trying to make sense of his thoughts. He wondered if he was holding her back. He wondered if he even belonged in her future. These thoughts kept him awake, replaying moments they had shared. Afraid that each one might soon become a memory, She felt the distance, too. It hurt more than she expected. She had imagined they would face the decision together, but instead, she felt like she was slowly losing him, even before anything had changed. Some nights, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if love was supposed to feel this uncertain. One evening, they met after a long day. The sky was gray, the air heavy with the promise of rain. They walked side by side through the park, not holding hands like they usually did. Their steps were slow, cautious. "Why does it feel like you're already gone?" she asked suddenly, stopping near the old bench where they had first talked. He froze. Her words hit deeper than he expected. "I'm not gone," he said quietly. "It feels like you are," she replied. "You don't talk the same. You don't look at me the same." He struggled to find the right words. "I'm just trying to understand where I fit," he admitted. "Your life is moving forward so fast. Mine feels stuck." She stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. "You're not stuck. You matter." "To me, but for how long?" he asked, the fear finally breaking through. "What happens when you leave? When your world gets bigger and I'm still here?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Why does it have to mean losing each other?" "Because distance changes things," he said. "People change." Silence fell between them, heavy and painful. Rain began to fall softly around them, but neither moved. For the first time since they met, the space between them felt uncertain, fragile. They parted that night without resolving anything. No promises were made. No plans were decided. Just quiet goodbyes and aching hearts. The days that followed were some of the hardest. They spoke less. Messages were shorter. Meetings were postponed. Both tried to stay busy, but nothing filled the empty space left by the other's absence. He threw himself into work, even as hours were cut back. He cleaned shelves that didn't need cleaning, rearranged books that were already neat. At night, he sat with his notebook open, but couldn't write a single word. Everything he wanted to say felt tangled and unclear. She focused on preparing for the possible move, gathering information, attending meetings, smiling when people congratulated her. But every step forward felt heavy. Success didn't feel right when it came with so much uncertainty. One evening, she visited the bookstore without telling him. She stood quietly between the shelves, watching him help a customer. He looked tired, older somehow. When he noticed her, surprise flickered across his face. They didn't speak at first. They just looked at each other, all the unspoken emotions filling the space. "I didn't want us to end like this," she said softly. "Neither did I," he replied. They talked then, really talked. About fear. About timing. About how easy it was to love when things were simple, and how hard it became when life demanded choices. There were tears. There were long pauses. But there was honesty too. "I don't want to lose you," she said. "But I also don't want to lose myself," he nodded. "And I don't want to be the reason you don't grow." They stood there, surrounded by stories of other lives, other struggles, other loves that had survived against the odds. It reminded them that nothing meaningful came without risk. That night, they walked together once more through the city's streets. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement shining under streetlights. They didn't have all the answers, but something had shifted. The fear was still there, but so was the love. They realized that being tested didn't mean being broken. Sometimes, it meant being asked to choose, to grow. To trust even when the path wasn't clear. As they stood at the corner where they would part ways, he reached for her hand. She held it tightly. "No matter what happens," he said, "this is real." She nodded, her voice steady despite the tears. "And that matters." The city moved around them, unaware of the quiet battle being fought between fear and hope. Their hearts were tired, but they were still beating in the same rhythm, still reaching for each other even when the future felt uncertain. This was the test they hadn't expected, and whether they would pass it together was a question only time could answer. The days after that night felt quieter, but not empty. Something had changed between them. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled every thought. Instead, there was a slow understanding growing, like a soft light that refused to go out. They didn't rush into decisions. They met without pressure, sometimes walking in silence, sometimes talking late into the night. They learned that being together didn't always mean having answers. Sometimes it simply meant choosing to stay present. Even when the future felt unclear, the young woman eventually received a final confirmation about the opportunity. She would need to move within a few months. The news felt heavy, but not sharp like before. She told him on a quiet evening, sitting beside him on the familiar park bench. "I wanted you to hear it from me," she said. He nodded, his chest tightening for a moment. "Thank you." They sat there, watching the trees sway gently in the wind. He thought about how far they had come, how something so unexpected had become such an important part of his life. He realized that love wasn't about holding someone in place. It was about standing beside them even when paths shifted. "I don't want us to live in fear anymore," he said finally. "I don't want every moment to feel like it might be the last." She turned toward him. "What do you want then?" He took a breath. "I want to try. Even if it's hard. Even if it means trusting something I can't control." Her eyes filled with emotion. "I want that too." From that moment, they chose honesty over avoidance. They talked about how they would stay connected, how often they would talk, how they would make space for each other's lives. They didn't pretend it would be easy. They didn't promise perfection. They promised effort. The weeks moved quickly after that. Life seemed to speed up, as if the city itself knew something important was happening. They made memories on purpose now, not because they were afraid of losing time, because they had learned how valuable it was. They visited places they had always passed but never entered. Small restaurants, quiet streets, hidden corners of the city. They laughed more freely again. The tension slowly softened into something warmer, deeper. The young man found a new sense of direction too. Inspired by everything that had happened, he started sharing his writing online. Short reflections, quiet observations about life, love, and change. He didn't expect much, but people responded. They told him his words felt real, that they made them feel less alone. She encouraged him, reading every piece, believing in him, even when he doubted himself. For the first time, he felt like his voice mattered beyond the walls of the bookstore. As the moving day approached, emotions came in waves. Some days felt light, filled with excitement and hope. Other days felt heavy, full of quiet sadness. They allowed both to exist. On their last evening before her departure, they walked through the city one final time. The streets glowed under soft lights. Everything felt familiar, yet different. They stopped at the park, sitting on the bench where it had all begun. Neither spoke for a long time. Words felt unnecessary. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "So am I," he replied. They smiled at each other, knowing that fear didn't mean weakness. It meant something mattered. The next morning came too soon. They stood at the station, surrounded by noise and movement. Time felt cruel in its speed. She held his hands tightly. "This isn't goodbye," she said. "No," he replied. "It's just different." When she finally stepped away, he watched until she disappeared into the crowd. His chest ached, but there was also pride, love, and trust sitting beside the pain. The days without her were hard at first. The city felt quieter. The park felt larger. The cafe felt emptier. But they stayed connected. Messages turned into calls. Calls turned into long conversations that crossed time and distance. They shared everything. Successes, struggles, ordinary moments. Distance didn't erase the bond. It tested it, stretched it, but also strengthened it. Months passed. She grew into her new role. Gaining confidence and clarity, he continued writing, building something slowly, honestly. They visited each other when they could, counting down days like quiet victories. Each reunion felt like coming home. Over time, the fear that once threatened to pull them apart became something else entirely. It became proof of what they had survived together. One evening, after another long day, the young man sat by his window, notebook open. He wrote about two people who met by chance, who chose courage over comfort and love over fear. As he finished, his phone buzzed with a message from her. "I'm proud of you," it said. He smiled, feeling the truth of it settled deep inside him. Love hadn't arrived loudly for them. It didn't come with certainty or perfect timing. It came quietly through shared moments, difficult conversations, and the willingness to grow together even when the road was unclear. When two hearts finally met, they didn't stay the same. They changed, expanded, learned how to hold space for each other across distance and doubt. And in that meeting, they discovered something real, something lasting, something worth choosing. Again and again, time moved steadily, carrying them forward in ways neither had imagined. Life was no longer about the fear of losing each other, but about building something that could endure. The distance that once felt heavy became a quiet reminder of how strong their bond had grown. Every message, every call, every shared detail of their day became a thread weaving their hearts closer together, even across miles. He woke each morning with a sense of purpose. The young man's days were busy, but full of meaning. He had found a rhythm that balanced work, writing, and the quiet anticipation of hearing from her. Each note she sent, each story she shared, brought a small, comforting joy that kept him grounded. He wrote in his notebook daily, capturing thoughts, memories, and reflections about their journey. Sometimes he would write a simple sentence like, "She noticed the small things I never noticed about myself." And it would carry the weight of everything he felt for her. She, on her side, grew into her new environment with a strength she hadn't fully realized she had. She faced challenges at work, in moments of self-doubt, yet she carried a quiet confidence rooted in their connection. When she felt unsure, she would think of him, of the way he had always encouraged her to notice the beauty in small things and trust her own instincts. It was a constant reminder that she wasn't navigating the world alone, that there was someone rooting for her, understanding her in a way few others could. Months passed like this, filled with moments both ordinary and extraordinary. They visited each other whenever they could, sharing long walks, quiet dinners, and hours of conversation. Every reunion was a mix of laughter, relief, and wonder at how naturally they fit together, despite the changes in their lives. They learned to treasure every second without rushing, letting the moments stretch just enough to feel complete. One chilly evening, they met at the park, where it had all begun. The leaves were turning gold, the air crisp, and the fading sunlight painted long shadows across the paths. They walked side by side, the silence comfortable and easy. No words were needed. The warmth between them spoke louder than any conversation ever could. He stopped near the old bench, his hands in his pockets, and looked at her. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" he asked. She smiled, a gentle warmth lighting her face. "Every day. And I think about how much I didn't realize I needed someone like you." They sat down together, shoulders brushing, watching the few people passing through the park. Children laughed in the distance. A dog barked playfully, and the city's hum felt soft and steady. They talked about small things, the taste of coffee in the cafe they loved, a book he had read, a design project she had finished, but beneath the words, there was an unspoken acknowledgement of everything they had endured together. One afternoon, he surprised her with a small gift, a notebook filled with short reflections he had written over the months. Each page contained a thought, a memory, or an observation inspired by her or their shared moments. She flipped through it carefully, laughter and tears mingling as she read. "You've been carrying all of this?" she asked softly. "I didn't know how else to show it," he replied. "It's all for you, really." She closed the notebook, holding it to her chest. "It's perfect. Just like this. Us." The young man realized then that love didn't need grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It thrived in the attention, care, and thoughtfulness woven into everyday life. It was in noticing her favorite cafes, in sending a text to check if she was okay, in listening when she spoke about challenges and dreams alike. It was in the quiet persistence of showing up again and again, even when life was messy. Life, of course, continued to bring challenges. There were moments of tension when misunderstandings crept in, days when schedules clashed, and times when worry threatened to overshadow joy. Yet each challenge became an opportunity to grow closer, to practice patience, and to reaffirm the trust they had built. They discovered that a strong connection wasn't about avoiding problems, but about facing them together, with honesty and empathy. One evening, while walking home after visiting a small art gallery, she paused at the corner of the street. "I've realized something," she said. He looked at her curiously. "What is it?" "I've realized that I don't want to imagine a life without you," she said, her voice steady but soft. "Even when things are hard, even when we're apart for weeks, I want us in my life. Always." He felt his chest tighten, a warmth spreading through him that made words feel small. "I feel the same," he said simply. "You're part of everything now." They stood together, hands brushing, hearts full, and the city lights twinkled around them like a quiet celebration. In that moment, the future felt uncertain, but full of promise. It wasn't about grand plans or perfect timing. It was about choosing each other over and over. Despite the difficulties and unknowns, as the months turned into a year, their bond continued to strengthen. They celebrated small milestones, finishing projects, completing personal goals, and finding joy in ordinary days. They laughed at shared jokes, supported each other through challenges, and discovered that even small gestures carried immense weight in the life of love. A handwritten note, a call after a long day, a favorite snack brought over without being asked. Each act became a reminder of the care and attention that had defined their journey. On quiet nights, they would sit together, talking about dreams yet unfulfilled, sharing hopes for the future. He imagined opening a small bookshop cafe of his own one day, a place full of stories and warmth. She imagined creating designs that inspired people, work that mattered deeply. And in every dream, they included each other, knowing that their shared support could make anything possible. Sometimes, they would sit in silence, simply enjoying the presence of the other. Words were not always necessary. The rhythm of their breathing, the occasional brush of hands, the quiet comfort of being understood, these moments reminded them that love was as much about presence as it was about words. They also discovered the joy of sharing ordinary life together. Grocery shopping became a playful adventure. Cooking meals was a collaboration of laughter and minor mistakes, and even doing chores felt lighter when done side by side.